Okay, Chairman, it's 5 o'clock. The recording has started.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for attending. May I remind everyone present that the meeting will be recorded via the internet and this recording archived for future viewing. Could all participants mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, can they please put their hand up if they can be seen or use the chat function? If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard, then they should let the chairman or democratic officer know. If they have a webcam, then they should be tried turning this off, as this will help with broadband or Wi-Fi bandwidth, so they at least can hear and be heard. Thank you for bearing with me through that, which takes us on to agenda item 1 of the Healthy Living and Social Care Scrutiny Committee, Tuesday the 12th of January 2021 at 5 p.m. for our remote meeting. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. I have none. Have you got any? Anybody else got any?
I haven't received any, Chairman.
Thank you. Agenda item 2 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of December 2020, which is page 1 to 7. Is everybody happy with this for me to remove it on block, or would you like to go through page by page?
Move on block, Chair.
Thank you. Moved. Moving on to agenda item 3 is to receive declarations of interest, including whipping declarations. Has anybody got any? No. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 4, which is the reports of the Director of Social Services. Agenda item 4 is an update on the Cardiff and Vale Glamorgan Regional Partnership Board. Cass Doman will lead in presentation, who is the Director of Health and Social Care Integration. We would have received this last year, providing updates if it wasn't for COVID. Very welcome, Cass. And would you like to take us through the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll be happy to take you through the report. So this is an annual update of the activities of the Regional Partnership Board. So my role is I work on behalf of the partnership across the 2 local authorities and the Health Board. So I'll give you a quick canter through the report and what's been happening since last year, and obviously happy to take any questions afterwards. I also have my colleagues here, Rachel Evans, Suzanne Clifton and Lance Carver, who are obviously operational leads on the front line at the moment, and will be able to answer any detailed questions. So obviously last year has been massively dominated by COVID-19. I don't need to tell you that, and I'd really like to start by paying tribute to my frontline colleagues and the immense effort and innovation that they've undertaken to keep people safe as best as they can. And I think it's feeling even tougher than ever at the moment for everybody. This annual report is unusual in that a lot of the activities of the Regional Partnership Board were stood down during the peak of the pandemic. It was clearly more important to focus on looking after the needs of our citizens, their immediate needs, rather than thinking about the longer term strategic programme that the RPB is engaged with. Nevertheless, we did manage to continue some developments and some thinking during last year, but it was significantly less than we would have anticipated. The RPB actually stood down initially as the civil contingency arrangements in each region across the region took control of the situation and the planning and response to COVID. And actually, Welsh Government reduced the reporting significantly, and they recognised that actually our attention and the attention of our frontline leads had to be focused on the response to the pandemic. A lot of our staff and our project staff were actually redeployed, and rightly so, to the effort responding to the pandemic. So apart from those pieces of work that were immediately responding to the pandemic and keeping people safe at home or facilitating getting people out of hospital, if they weren't concerned with that, then we actually took the decision to stand down a lot of the activities. We have received over the last year some additional funding from Welsh Government to support us in the COVID effort. We had some specific COVID funding, and we also had some what was termed discharge to recover and assess funding as well to support the additional capacity that we needed to respond. Those small pots of money, short-term pots of money, bring problems in their own right, because of course finding the staff to employ in the first place is a huge challenge, and that continues to be a huge challenge. I won't go through the detail of the annual report because it's there for you to read yourselves, and there's some really nice case studies in there and a couple of videos at the end, which I'd really encourage you to have a look at. They're very brief, but it does bring to life some of the work of the Regional Partnership Board and the work in particular in the Vale of Glamorgan. Over the last year, as the remit of the Regional Partnership Board has widened, and a particular emphasis around children and young people, we've also extended our membership. So we now have representatives from housing and from education, as well as the representatives from social care, the third sector, and health services. The meeting continues to be chaired by Councillor Susan Gray Councillor Susan Elsmore. I just married her off there, from Cardiff Council, but that chair transfers to Vale Councillor, Councillor Ben Gray, from this April. So that will be a great step forward. So I will take you through the arrangements around COVID. So as I mentioned, the RPB stood down. A joint management executive was put in place across the health board and the two local authorities, and that was really about being able to give that executive leadership to immediate challenges to our system. So our response to care homes, our ability to get personal protective equipment on the ground, testing, of course, discharge arrangements out of hospital, and most recently the vaccination arrangements. That has been a weekly meeting that's provided oversight. We were required by Welsh Government to undertake a population needs assessment to really understand the impact of COVID-19 on our services and on our citizens. There's a summary of the findings from that. We undertook that by seeking the advice of our frontline leads, who really understand what the impact has been at first hand. And what we're seeing in a nutshell is, significant increase in the complexity of our referrals, as well as the volume, a real increase in demand around mental health, abuse, financial hardship, work and workforce availability as well. And I think you'll all be very, very aware of the socioeconomic impact of the pandemic and how profound that will be. And I think we are anticipating as partners to really see that translate into demand on services and the complexity of that of casework as the pandemic plays out, and the implications of that. Moving on to the Children's Commissioner report, No Wrong Door. That was a major report during last year. It was published by the Children's Commissioner, Sally Holland. The Regional Partnership Board endorsed all of the recommendations in that, and there was a real focus there on the missing middle and the ability of us to be able to wrap our services around those vulnerable children, vulnerable for whatever reason, and to take a much more integrated approach to, in particular, emotional well-being and mental health, including safe accommodation when that's needed. And that report really influenced our plans for next year, which I'll come on towards the end of this presentation. Care homes was a major focus of our activities. We're currently distributing funds to enable care homes to install facilities to support friends and families to visit safely when it is safe to do that. We work together very much on personal protective equipment and testing, and the discharge arrangements out of hospital to keep that as safe as possible. They really have been on the front line of COVID-19 within care homes. It's been hugely challenging, as I'm sure you are very aware, and it continues to be so. The winter, of course, comes every year, but this year was different, given that it was the usual challenges of winter that we can predict. We know roughly what they're going to look like, but this time it was winter with COVID layered on top of that. Additional funds were provided to be distributed by the Regional Partnership Board, and there's the summary on page 7 there of how we distributed that. So that was mainly focused around additional capacity. It was around additional domiciliary care capacity, care home bed capacity, and staff to be able to support that. Those are being that's all in place now and continues to be implemented. Moving on to the Integrated Care Fund Capital Programme. This is a longer term programme, and there's been some significant developments for the Vale, not least the Older People's Village in Penarth. And by the end of this year, we will have completed our planning and feasibility studies around that, and then we will be able to move into the next phase around that. There was some really, there's a really nice case study actually within the report around T. Dewey Sant, the care home that was updated to become much more dementia friendly. So colour coding and some artwork to help people orientate themselves. The Lantwit Major Community Hub is the developments to that will be partially completed by the end of March 21. And I've mentioned the capital investment into care homes. So there's £1,000 available for each care home to be able to make adaptations to enable visiting to residents. There's a low uptake at the moment on that. So if you have any connections to care homes, we'd really encourage people to take that up. We're making the application very, very straightforward, very low administration on that. In terms of the forward look for next year, the RPB itself is really, really keen to accelerate the integration of health and social care services and to have that impact on our population. And our focus next year is very much on moving away from the relatively small but really important projects and using those small projects that we've done to date as building blocks for something much more significant. So next year we're in the preparation phase now of looking at how we develop place-based or locality-based integrated models of care across health, social care and wider range of services. And we have 3 localities at the moment already arranged. So we have 2 in Cardiff and of course we have 1 in the Vale. And I'll be working very closely with Suzanne and Lance on that to develop what that looks like. And we hope that COVID will allow us to get our heads above the parapet to really do some thinking around that and to develop that over next year. We're also focusing on how we can make services for children and young people much less fragmented, in spite of the fantastic expertise and effort of all of our professional and support staff. So there's 2 angles to that. One is around how we join up services around emotional well-being and mental health, and how we create a service that's based around the child and their family, and similarly around children and young people with complex health and health needs and disabilities, which again can be experienced as fairly fragmented. So there's a real groundswell of support for doing that. Don't underestimate how significant and how complex those programs of work are, but there's a real will to wrap those services around the needs of children and family and make the experience that much better and the outcomes that much better. Finally, we're in the process of simplifying our governance for the Regional Partnership Board, and we're trying to move away from organisations towards people and places rather than services. So we're developing 3 new partnerships, so a Starting Well partnership, a Living Well partnership and an Ageing Well partnership. So they're based on the premise of, if you ask the question, what would it take to enable people to age well? That's leads to very different solutions than if we look at the way we currently configure and organise our services. So we're really hoping that will release some imagination and some great new ideas to improve services and outcomes for people. We've just had confirmed our funding for next year from Welsh Government. It's the final year of most of the programmes in line with the term of the Senedd. So we're just working through now the allocations of that funding to take forward the existing schemes as well as our plans for the new programmes that I've outlined just now. And finally, just to encourage the committee to review those short video clips that we've linked into the paper. It's just really good to see the direct impact that the work of the Regional Partnership Board is having. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kath. Thank you very much indeed. I'm sure we all agree that you must be working under enormous pressure and difficulties at the moment, and cannot praise the staff and thank them enough for all they're doing. Does anybody have any questions? I can't see you, so you'll just have to come in. Did you have a question, Neil?
Yeah, just turn the mic on. Yes, thanks very much. Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks, Kath, for your presentation. I mean, it's interesting, and I welcome it. Yeah, and I agree with your comments about your staff and the Trojan duty they've done over the last 10 months or so under extremely trying conditions. I have one very minor point about point 2.7 on page 7 of our report, which is basically a misprint. You've referred to Dewi as the special schools, but when you actually mean Tideri with an R on the first line on page 7. But then
my apologies for that.
We come on to the part 2.8 on the emotional, particularly the emotional well-being and integrating that with the youth. And I mean, I welcome that. I think it's an amazingly needed step forward. I mean, that there have been disjoints between the services for young people as they get older, and integrating that now, I think it's well in time. It's needed now. I wanted to ask though about the shape of things going forward. I mean, you've got a lot of stuff there about the shape of things going forward, but I mean, with the best will in the world, people are relying on the idea that the vaccine's going to actually wave the magic wand and get rid of COVID, and anybody who sort of paid attention know that's not true. It's now endemic. It's part of the population. The COVID virus is of a different nature from a lot of viruses in that it's an RNA rather than a DNA-based organism, and therefore more fragile and more likely to mutate. And the mutation we've seen in the southeast of England and the one that's coming up from South Africa are just two examples of thousands that have already happened, but they just happen to be worse than the one that started it all off. We can anticipate that there's going to be even more mutations because that's the nature of the beast, and some of those are going to be vicious. And so we are going to have a new way. We're going to have a new way of living. The vaccine's not going to address all of those in the same way as a flu vaccine only addresses 3 or 4 per year, 3 or 4 variants of flu per year, and the other ones come through and you wonder why you've got it when you've had the shot. That too is a coronavirus. We need a picture, I think, of where we're going forward, please. That's it. That's my question.
In the context of COVID.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please.
Yes. I mean, of course, you're absolutely right. It's a very uncertain picture. We will be living with this for a long time to a greater or lesser degree. We hope that the vaccination will give some light at the end of the tunnel and allow us to live a little more freely than we are at the moment. And there is a major vaccination programme going on at the moment, which I'm sure you're fully briefed on. I mean, I think while we're in such a crisis situation at the moment, that then the focus is on keeping the wheels on the bus. Really, it's about keeping the basic services going, keeping people safe, maintaining their dignity and so on. ensuring that the hospitals are able to function and don't become overwhelmed. And as long as we're in this situation, that will remain the case. And we won't be attempting to make major changes to services while we're in that situation, not least because we have to do that service development and improvement with our service leads, and they are significantly otherwise engaged at the moment. I think, as I have as much as a crystal ball as you do at the moment as to what life is going to be like in the future, but I think we do have to accept that it will be with some form of COVID around us. Some of the innovation that we've seen around shifting services online and then to other mechanisms for people accessing services where that's possible. It clearly isn't for all services, but where that's possible, then there are real opportunities. And we're actually undertaking a big piece of work at the moment, capturing all of that innovation across the health and social care system so that we don't lose it, because it's become almost business as usual now, and it'd be very easy to lose that innovation. So we are collecting that up, and that will help us inform how we design services going into the future. But I think that resilience that comes from working together as a system rather than battening down the hatches within our individual organisations is what the RPB is all about, really. And our ambitions around integrating as much as we can that makes sense to work together closely on, it is part of that resilience. In terms of what that looks like, we'll have to work that through. We'll have to understand what the challenges are, what our freedoms are, what are what the limitations are, and build those into our new models of care. But as I say, whilst we're in the crisis right now, we won't be doing any of that. It's about keeping those services going and keeping people safe is the absolute priority right now.
Does that answer your question, Neil? Thank you. I believe Councillor Rachel Nugent-Finn has a question.
I do. Thank you, Chair. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Great. Apologies for being a bit late. Thank you. Thanks very much, Kath, for the very comprehensive, detailed report. Much appreciated. I've just a couple of questions and a couple of things I just want to say as well, if that's okay. Regards question 2.5, care homes. Going back now to the, the first part of the lockdown in March, there's sister records, the early stage of pandemic risk to residents, staff, etc. In respect of the PPE, you don't talk about domiciliary care packages, the brokerage and the care providers. So I just want to know how they were protected, because going back to the early days, I remember I was inundated as a ward member and also as a CHC member about this is, like I said, domiciliary, brokerage and care providers not having access to PPE. So what was the response to that, and where are we now? That's the first one. Shall I do it one by one, Kath?
Yeah, because then we can work out who's best to respond to you. Yeah. Sure.
That's that one.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Oh, do you want me to go on to the next one?
Go on to the next one, yeah.
Okay. The next one then is regards the dementia case study. It says about the smart house enabling. We've actually brought that to two committees. The Health, Living and Social Care, but also we want to take it through our homes and safer communities, where we're working with, I think it's Innovative Trust, Neil, to get a presentation on this, because again, having visited lots of our care providers in the Vale of Glamorgan, our residents and service users are crying out for this. So that's very interesting. That's more of a statement. I'm very much looking forward to having that, and so please keep this committee and anything else appropriate up to date. And in terms of your looking forward, the CHC holds significant service user information on TW SANS. So again, in terms of your understanding of the challenges, perhaps you could speak to CHC members, because they've collated some very good, vast information. If you want to answer the first one, then I just want to summarise with how I feel the Vale of Glamorgan are going to fit into some of this as well. Thank you, Kath.
Thanks very much. I'll note those last two comments and make sure we follow up on those. I'm going to hand over to Lance, actually, Lance Carver, to that question around domiciliary care PPE, because Lance was absolutely in the thick of that and will be able to answer in detail. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nugent-Finn, and I should say Suzanne was as well. I suppose in terms of the PPE, and I it wasn't I suppose it was a moving feast, as you can imagine, from March. And I suppose what happened initially is the guidance wasn't particularly clear, if I'm honest, and there were issues with the availability of PPE for both care homes and for domiciliary care. And then the guidance, fortunately, was much clearer, and the guidance was very much about the kind of settings or activity that an individual would be undertaking. And so actually the requirements for somebody working in a care home and somebody working in domiciliary care in terms of what they're supposed to wear as PPE is remarkably similar if they're giving personal care, and we distributed it to domiciliary care agencies in exactly the same way as we did to care homes, which we got the supply from Welsh Government and had to do that. And at one point, I think the army were brought in to assist with that. Actually, when the army came to our store that we had set up in the Vale, so we didn't used to have a PPE store or a PPE distribution service. They were very impressed with what we did and came up with no suggestions for us to improve on anything. So I'm really confident that we've had some really good staff who have been repurposed from elsewhere in social services to help with that. We worked very closely with emergency planning as well in terms of how we delivered that, and that's how we continue to operate. Because staff are now starting to get the vaccine, the advice still is that they should continue to wear that protective equipment certainly for the foreseeable future, and so we're using that to distribute that still. And interestingly, I suppose there are changes happening as we speak in terms of testing. So there are lateral flow tests being distributed through that route as well now, and new requirements. One came out yesterday. So in terms of how we operate some of that. So I suppose what has worked really well is having that structure and that service. Again, I suppose we've worked well regionally in terms of working out who does what across both local authorities and the health board. And at times it makes sense for us to do that on we'll do it once for the whole region, and other times it makes sense for us to have our own separate things. And in this case, with the PPE delivery, it was separate because it's a very local thing, as you can imagine. Deliveries. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, very much so. Thank you very much, Lance. And I guess this is to Lance and to Kath really, but thinking about how all of this is going to roll out now. I think it's just really to emphasise that local knowledge and expertise is going to be crucial really in encouraging everybody from all parts of the community to, if they want to, obviously it's a choice, be vaccinated. But the Vale of Glamorgan Council, I feel, have a unique relationship with the people that they represent. And, this means that they are very well placed to reach out to those in priority groups and beyond. So I'm sure this is part of what you're going to do, but I can't stress, I feel that the relationship is already set between service users and the Vale of Glamorgan. It's been absolutely extraordinary year. I know we'll all agree on that at some point. And we've seen the best really in local government demonstrated in every day, from statutory to residential to, other requirements. But, we do keep running as well as possible in each stage of this pandemic. And again, I just want to say that to everybody involved. So that's UHB, Health and the Council really. But thanks again for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Charles, you're on mute.
Thank you, Lance. There was a lot of disturbance at one point through that, so if you're not talking, can you please mute? Thank you, Cass, very much indeed for that very comprehensive report and for everything that everybody's doing. And if there aren't any more questions, can we note the report?
I believe Councillor Gray has his hand raised, Chairman.
Right, I can't see that. Thank you. Councillor Gray, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's more of a point. Obviously, Kath raised the involvement I've had and will continue to have with the RPB, and I wanted to reflect on what Kath was saying. This looking at what we're moving to and how the systems work. This is sort of the headspace within the RPB to look outside of some of the response work to the pandemic that the local authority has been doing. So I think you should see them as twin tracked and essentially, I mean, we've covered PPE a number of times before, and we're always happy to learn anything new that we can do. And certainly reports that we've had through the Scrutiny Committee as detailed those things. But I welcome the breadth of reports and certainly how we've sought to look at things from an RPB level. Those case studies are really helpful, because I think it's really helpful to latch on to an individual thing and see a user's experience. And sometimes all these layers of bureaucracy that may be perceived as bureaucracy, I think seeing how people's lives are affected by the changes we're trying to make and the systems that the RPB is trying to put into place is really important. So I don't want to lose track of that when we're talking about both the response to the pandemic, which is absolutely at the front of our minds and is something which the local authority and all these partners have worked together on. But the work of the RPB is really about driving forward how we work in partnership, and I think there are some interesting things that we've got coming up. And so happy to, of course, if there are things between now and our next annual feedback to bring anything to the committee that there's questions about as they come up. But I just wanted to underline that. I thought it was a really good report in that sense, and just to back up everything else people have said. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. So I think everybody's in agreement that it was very well received report, Cass. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 5, which is the Audit Wales review of outsourced leisure services. This report is different to what we usually have, as it is from the Audit Wales. Sian Clements, is she here from Audit Wales to present the report?
I believe it's Samantha, Chairman.
Samantha, right, thank you. The report includes the covering report from us, the actual audit report with proposals for improvement, the action plan as to how to respond to these, and the point of interest, I think, is how we explore this and operate this, because this will not work because of COVID. So this is our opportunity to add or take away any ideas. So Samantha, would you like to speak on the report?
Thank you, Chair. I've had some pretty horrendous digital and connection problems, so I'm not going to risk putting my camera on. I hope that the committee is okay with that.
Yeah, fine.
Okay, so first of all, I mean, as a bit of a common thread through the committee so far is around the significant issues of the pandemic that everybody's experienced this year. And with that in mind, I think it's worth mentioning the time frame of this piece of work. It formed part of our audit plan from our year 2019-20, and the fieldwork took place in the summer of 2019. Then, in terms of the clearance process, we attended a soft launch meeting with officers in January of 2020. And at that point, we took on board all of the comments raised by officers. And then, as part of our clearance process, which was delayed because of the pandemic, we did involve Legacy Limited in that. So hopefully we have taken on board all of the comments of those interested parties and stakeholders. I don't intend to read or go through the report in detail, as I'm conscious of the precious time of the committee and the fact that officers and members have probably looked at the report in detail already.
Yes,
and it's also, thank you, and it's also worth mentioning because it does provide a lot of context and does set the scene perfectly.
I'm sorry, Samantha, would you mind just referring, I think you were referring to a section of the report there. We lost your audio.
Oh dear, I am sorry. I'm having
That's
real
okay.
problems.
That's okay. Don't worry. I'll stick with you all the way and let you know. But you said that you were referring, you wanted to refer members to a particular section, I believe.
Sorry, I was referring to the covering report, the detailed covering report, and how it's really helpful in terms of providing the necessary context and really does set the scene. I then wanted to say that overall it is not a negative report. At the time we thought that it would be a useful exercise to assist the council as it was navigating its way through its contract extension discussions, and we'd intended it, to identify areas and issues for both parties to consider as they work through those discussions in the process. So now in the midst of the pandemic, we're all in a different place, and I think the implications of this on the contract extension, as stated in para 2.6 of the covering report, because I wasn't aware of that previously. And I suppose now, just to refresh in terms of the key messages, the council throughout austerity has managed to retain its leisure provision and kept its leisure centres open, and was able to raise an income from it. It has strengthened its contract management arrangements during that time. Although I think we've identified there are some opportunities to explore in terms of how improvements of VFM could be made. So in terms of those key messages, underpinned very quickly, at the time, it was the service did lack that strategy to shape the service, although that the leisure strategy is now in place. Yes, it could better apply the sustainable development principle through its contract extension negotiations with Legacy Limited. And obviously the opportunity to improve the contract management arrangements and the ability to assess value for money. So from the piece of work, we raised two proposals for improvement. The first, in terms of strengthening the application of the Sustainable Development Principle, adopting a more strategic approach to collaboration, improving levels of integration and better planning and the delivery of legacy leisure with, for example, other public bodies. And I've got a list here, but I won't go through them, but there's quite a few different entities, and including citizens and service users. Then the second proposal around strengthening contract management arrangements and VFM arrangements in terms of improving how it reports. So, for example, perhaps more balanced reporting, looking at the successes of the service and maybe a focus on improvement activities. And then the second point around ensuring better involvement with committee members, so they have a better opportunity to identify agenda items and to engage proactively with service users, for example, to assess their views of service directly. And then finally exploring the availability of other comparative benchmarking data. So, I mean, these could be evaluative, for example, the impact on health. And for example, at the time we picked up that Legacy Leisure were actually operating at over 100 different sites, so there could have been some opportunities perhaps to look at how they were performing elsewhere. So I suppose at this point, I'd like to bring my session to a close, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? Rachel?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, thanks very much for presenting it in such a very nice way. And again, it's really interesting to read it. I kind of don't agree with some things, because I think actually this is the perfect time to strategize and reinvent. We've all got, far more time actually on our hands now to be thinking very differently, very laterally, very inclusively about how we're going to be moving forward. So I hope that comes across in the positive way in which I mean it. Okay, but some of my thoughts really are service user engagement. Yeah, absolutely critical. that's why I took this particular committee went into leisure. It was a leisure heavy agenda, and it seemed absolutely appropriate. So it did get what we wanted to. That would be something perhaps, and I thank the members and the chair for supporting that idea and that initiative. But I feel that's definitely going to be a way forward. That's just a win-win, really. Sorry, bear with me. I'm just looking through some of my notes. Public bodies. In terms of re-engagement, I think anybody that uses the leisure facility now is going to be busting to get back into that environment. I can speak for myself, but I also speak for lots of people that I work and represent. So again, we're going to have to think very differently, in terms of how we do engage with people. So it's a poster on the wall, advertising 1 month, get one free. It's not going to be enough. It needs to be taken right out into the community. And I think, as I said, reading through the report, it's aligned with what some of the failings are and some of the things that you're out, you sort of seem to be pulling out. We have to think significantly differently now. And I hope that's where we are. In terms of how we do engage with people. There's one more question at the end then, which is the council's actions. I just wondered where we are again in terms of the outcomes and the responsibilities and the reporting of what's being proposed by Welsh Audit. So again, it's a bit of a cross one. Dave, I'm sure you're going to be answering the majority of them, but I can't help but think of this time as an opportunity, as I said, to reinvent what we need to be doing much better this time round. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Has anybody else got anything? Any questions? I think that the way we scrutinise leisure centres could be more impactful. I think that's one thing we can look into. Once we're out of COVID, I think that we should visit all leisure centres and meet the staff. And probably another good idea, I think, would be to put a survey out to people, asking them whether they enjoy the leisure centres, what they like, and how we can be more impactful for them. Steve Griffiths, have you got a question?
Neil's before me. I think he's got his hand up first.
Neil,
I'll go now after.
Yeah. One of the things that I picked up on the report was the question of scrutiny in terms of what's going on in leisure. And I'll remind the committee that we did have a subcommittee that was going around the various leisure centres and looking at what was going on in the past, which has become somewhat moribund due to the restrictions of COVID. A, they're not open, so we can't go, and B, we can't go because of social distancing and all the rest of it. So it would be unfair to put pressure on them. But as soon as we can restart that subcommittee safely, then I think it's important that we do. Because it certainly serves as a strong purpose in terms of looking at what's going on in the various leisure centres, particularly, and how we are working with legacy leisure. I know Dave Nevitt's he's got his hand up. I know he's got some stuff to talk about in terms of the forward programme and negotiating the new contract. He's got some ideas around that, so I'll leave that to him. But certainly, I think we need to think about the way in which we engage in terms of scrutiny, and this committee is the obvious route for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, PF 1.2, point number 2, is improving reporting arrangements to ensure members receive a full timely account of service performance. So that could obviously be put into that category. So thank you for that, Neil.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to, kind of.
Yeah. Steve?
Cheers, Chair. Just echoing your sentiments regarding the questionnaire. I think along the legacy leisure, I think a lot of things haven't changed for a long time, so it does give us a chance to reinvent a few things, especially with the gym and getting the questions to see what what could be improved there. I don't know if it's hopefully it's within the scope of this. A lot of things haven't changed, like I said, and now with COVID and people work from home, maybe we could look at a lot more remote things and just, yeah, try and reinvent ourselves a little bit more as well. Hopefully we can take that on board. On mute.
With things such as Instagram, Facebook, Zoom, things like that, is it, Steve?
Yeah.
Good idea.
Zoom and so forth, and yeah.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions before I bring Dave Nevitt in? Can't see anybody. Dave, have you got anything to say on the report?
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate all the comments that have come forward, and obviously we welcome the report and the input from the Welsh Audit Office and the recommendations that they're making. I think it's very good to have a critical friend look at our services at times, and has also given us a wake-up call in some things. I can reassure you that Legacy are very, very active in terms of social media, in terms of keeping their members informed, and obviously we keep a constant eye in terms of that. And obviously it's very disappointing that we find ourselves in the circumstances that we do regarding our facilities at the moment. Obviously you've seen the actions that we're proposing to take, and Neil mentioned the member working group, and obviously we're hoping to get that back and operating as quickly as possible. It's been particularly disappointing given the investment that we've made in the leisure centres with the new changing rooms, that we find ourselves in this situation at the moment, because obviously we were really looking forward to showing off our new facilities and the difference that was going to make and really marketing them. So I think when we are able to reopen, we have an advantage in terms of having a new offer in our centres, and we're keen to exploit that as much as possible. There was also some references in the audit report to value for money, and I'm really pleased to say that sort of sharpened our pencil in terms of looking at what other authorities are doing, and I hope to be able to share some information that we shared on a very brief scale with Welsh Audit Office yesterday in terms of actually how well our contract does perform in comparison with other contracts from a financial perspective. And obviously you've also seen in the report how well it performs in terms of the number of users that it actually attracts to our facilities. So I think very much as Samantha said, there is an awful lot of positives, but there's still things to be learnt, and clearly we need to be doing that. Okay.
Thank you. So the recommendation is, are we happy and agree to put into action the plan or not, with the addition of things that people have said? Is everybody in agreement? Yeah. Thank you very much, Samantha, and thank you very much, Dave, for being here this evening and
thank you,
talking
Chair.
through the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Moving on to
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item 6. This is our quarterly basis standard monitoring report with any updates. It is a bit late coming, but that is because of COVID once more. And Caroline is here, I think, to present the report.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you. The report shows us the position to the end of November. The first part of the report goes through the revenue position. We are showing a similar revenue position as we have done in previous months, which is anticipated an overspend of £1.5 million by year end. The overspend is anticipated to be in the adults services, partly due to additional payments made during the beginning of the pandemic to our frontline staff, but also due to increased costs through our community care packages. I just also would like to flag up this month that we may be anticipating an increase in expenditure in the children's services area between now and the end of the year. Partly due to COVID, we are seeing additional pressures on that service. There's more people coming through the door, more demand for the services, as I think we have previously sort of discussed in other committees. So just to flag up, while we haven't shown a change in the financial position, there is a potential that that may change between now and the end of the financial year. The other part of the report then looks at the capital programme. So there are a few schemes that we have listed there where they are potentially going to slip till next year, which are detailed in the report. So I won't go into them individually, but if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Does anybody have any questions? Can we just note the report then? Yeah, thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 7, which is the third quarter scrutiny decision tracking of recommendations and updated work programme scheduled for 2021. Amy, can you take us through this, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Lovely, fantastic, thank you. Obviously this is a report that belongs to the committee. It's a familiar report that all members will be aware of. The covering report just sets out the parameter of why and how we record our decision tracking in line with the Cabinet Forward Work Programme. The appendices, I will take you through very briefly. So appendices A to C are the previous decisions made by this committee, and obviously they are marked as completed or ongoing. Obviously, I'm asking for the members' permission to that they approve with those statuses, and therefore our decision tracking records will be updated accordingly. And the final appendices is Appendix D, which is the committee's forward work programme, which you as a committee have ownership for and can therefore change and amend as we go through, and therefore it's our rolling document which is continually changing. So if I quickly go to appendices A through to C, bear with me one moment just while I move through my screen. So for Appendix A, the actions are completed. So and that's the same for Appendix B. So effectively, what the committee wished to happen has happened, and therefore those actions are closed off. With regards to Appendix C, we have only one item that remains open, which was way back from June 2019 with regards to a report the committee received for Reshaping Services Adult Day Services meal provision. Obviously, there's been dramatic changes in the service, and the action was asking for the committee's comments to be included within the final report presented to Cabinet. Because of various reasons, that report hasn't actually made it to Cabinet yet, but that is still the intention for this year, 2021. So as soon as that report has gone through, we'll be able to sign that action off as completed. And then just to mention very briefly, the second point there on Appendix C was asking for the University Health Board to return to the committee following the end of the consultation that was taking place with regards to the Sam Davis ward in Barry. Obviously, there was a delay on the consultation ending. They extended it. Then there was a delay in being able to get them back to visit committee, and then obviously we've reached the national pandemic, and that's caused further delays. But I am now able to confirm that the University Health Board have confirmed that they will attend our next meeting in February in order to give us that response. So that's obviously has now been added to the forward work programme, which I'll come to shortly. So finally, for Appendix D, you'll see from the forward work programme that we are currently obviously going through the January items that have all been considered on time. For our next meeting in February, there are two reports that are anticipated. Sorry, one report and one presentation. So the presentation is the University Health Board presentation on the Sam Davis ward, as I've just mentioned. And then your second item is the Leisure Management Contract Year 8 performance report. With regards to telecare services, you'll see in the March entries there, we were originally hoping to have the telecare services update report for this month, but that's been slipped on Lance's request to March, and we are still intending to have the presentation from Innovate Trust, as Councillor Nugent-Finn referred to earlier on in this meeting, and we are hoping to still have that presentation alongside our telecare services update as per Councillor Thomas's suggestion. So that's all the main points from me, Chair. It doesn't really affect the content you've got in front of you, but just to point out, there is an additional paragraph in the covering report, paragraph 2.3, which is just to point out that obviously you've got the Q3 decision tracking in front of you, and you haven't had sight of one and two, but obviously that is due to our meetings not taking place as part of the national pandemic, and therefore the way that the date falls, we now are presenting to you with Q3. But I can assure you that all of the decisions that have previously been made have been tracked and are collated in the report in front of you this evening.
Thank you very much,
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Lance?
Thank you, Chair. I was just hoping to raise an issue in relation to the minute number 48 that's on Appendix C, where I suppose it was just to highlight this. A report came to Scrutiny Committee about day services with some, I suppose, future intentions of exploring different types of meal provision at our day services. And it was discussed with Scrutiny Committee, and I think the action there was that we would include anything in a cabinet report, and you'll see that goes back to June 2019. I think time has moved on significantly, and I have asked that cabinet report comes off the cabinet forward work programme, because I don't think at this stage we're in any position to be thinking about what meals we're providing at day services, particularly when our day services are struggling to even operate. I think so. I don't know how this would amend that recommendation, given it's kind of stuck in the system somewhere, isn't it? And I suppose what I didn't want to do was to do any of that behind or without being completely open about it, really. So I was going to suggest really that obviously if we were making any changes to day services in the future, we would have to get cabinet approval, and we would certainly bring it here for consideration first, and that we would start afresh rather than continuing with this process, because it's going to look very different than it did 2 years ago.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's quite sensible. Is everybody in agreement with that proposal from Lance? Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Does anybody else have anything they would like to pull up on any of the updates? No? Nobody? Okay. Thank you all very much. I don't have any urgent items. So on that note, I'd like to thank you all very much for your attendance. Please stay safe. I'm sure everybody's fed up with everybody saying that, but it's so important. And good night, and thank you all very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Chair. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.